Making use of debt. Is it a good or a bad thing? I'm David Zidel, and I'm going to take you through this discussion about whether using debt is good or bad, both as an individual and as a company. I'm going to discuss the use of debt first as an individual, and then I'll expand it to a company because the principles are still the same. So here's the story. Paul is looking to buy a property near the coast. And he goes and he finds this beautiful place, and it's going to cost him $1 million. So Paul goes and buys it. And because he buys it, he obviously needs to pay for it. So he pays the $1 million for it. And he is so happy that he goes and tells his friend, Sue, about the property that he bought. And she thinks this is a great deal. So she also goes and buys a property for the $1 million. But Sue doesn't pay $1 million. Sue only pays $200,000. How can Sue pay $200,000 for something that costs $1 million? She goes and she gets a mortgage bond for the rest of the money. Now the mortgage bond obviously won't be for the full amount. It'll be for the remaining amount, which is $800,000. And everybody's happy. And then at some stage, Paul decides he's going to sell the property. And he has a look at prices. And remember, he bought it for $1 million, but he's very happy to see that he can now sell it for $1.2 million. What is Paul's profit? He made a profit of the 1.2 minus the $1 million that he paid for it. So he made a profit of 200,000. So he's very happy with that. And Sue says, if you have decided to move, I'm also going to move. So she puts her property on the market. She also gets 1.2 million, and her profit is now the 1.2 minus what she paid for it, the 200, minus paying back the mortgage bond. But there's another thing she has to take into account, is the interest. She is now paying interest, so it's minus the interest. And so I'm going to add in here interest, and let's just assume that she paid 10% of this in interest. And here we have the scenario that the profit that they made is slightly different. Paul made a profit of 200,000 and Sue made a profit of 120,000. So clearly Paul is better off than Sue by 80,000. And therefore you would have people telling you that it is better not to make use of debt, because clearly 200 is bigger than 120. But if we look at it the way that you really should look at it, from a percentage return, if we look at our return on investment, what was the return percentage? Then Paul made 200,000 on an investment of $1 million, and that gave him a 20% return. And for Sue, the return was 60%, because it's 120,000 on the investment of 200,000. Now if we look at it, 60% is much better than 20%. Now we're saying that Sue's in a better position, because percentage-wise, she earned more. A little bit confusing. If we look in dollar terms, it seems as if Paul got more money. If we look at percentage terms, Sue did better percentage-wise. Which one do you look at? If I look at this investment, comparing Paul and Sue, Paul spent $1 million and Sue spent 200,000. Therefore, Paul spent 5 times more investing in this. And if Sue had also a million available, she could have done this 200,000 Rand investment 5 times. And if I take the 120 she made on each one and I multiply it by the 5 times, she would have made $600,000, which is then 3 times the 200,000 that Paul made, and therefore 60% is 3 times the 20. So it all adds up. So what this shows you is that by making use of debt, you have increased your returns. In this case, by 3 times. You made 3 times the return on your money by using debt. And you could look at it and say, well, then debt is obviously very good, and we should use debt. But wait, there's another leg to this argument. What happens if Paul decided to sell the property? When he goes to look to sell the property, he can't get 1.2 million because the market has dropped, and he can only get 800,000. What is his returns now? The returns that Paul is getting is minus 20%, a negative 200,000. He's losing $200,000. But Sue is getting a return of minus 140%, a negative return of over 100%. What does that mean when it's more than 100%? If you lose 100%, you're losing everything that you own. If you're losing more than 100%, you're losing everything you've invested and then some. Remember, Sue's investment was 200,000, and now she's losing 280,000. And now when we look at this, we say, hang on a second, debt is terrible. And yes, this highlights the aspect. Debt is good in good times, it's bad in bad times. Debt is like a magnifying glass. It'll make things look bigger and better when they're good, but it'll also make it look bigger and worse in bad times. So debt is good in the good times and bad in the bad times. And this is for an individual, but it applies to companies as well. When you take on debt, there are only 2 rules you need to consider. 1, will your returns be greater than your costs? Are you going to make more money than what it's going to cost you? That's rule number 1. And rule number 2 is, do you have the cash flow to pay for it in the meantime? In our example, the interest payments that Sue would need to pay, does she have that cash available to pay for it? I like to look at debt, if I make an analogy, like driving in a car. The more debt you make use of, the more you're putting your foot on the accelerator. The more you put your foot on the accelerator, the faster you go. The quicker you will get to your destination. But as you put your foot down on the accelerator and you go faster and faster, it gets more and more dangerous. And it's up to you to decide, what is that level of danger that you want to take on? And that level of danger is dependent on how comfortable you are, but even more so, it depends on the environment that you're in. If I'm in a car, I'm on the highway, it's a beautiful clear day, I can see 4 miles ahead, and there is no traffic or very little traffic. I can go faster. I'll be very comfortable going faster. At some point, I'll be thinking, maybe I'm getting to the point where I'm really going too fast, and then I won't go any faster. The same with debt. Same as you put your foot on the accelerator to go faster, with a business, it's okay to use debt, to use borrowing, to then reach your destination or make your profits as you go along by using other people's money. And it gets to a point where you're starting to feel uncomfortable that it's a little bit too much debt. Now, if I was on a road and it was raining, maybe even snowing, and it's a dirt road, and there are lots of twists and turns, and it's now nighttime, I will be crazy to go at the same speed as I would when it was a clear day and I was on a highway. So I would then slow down. And it's exactly the same with the use of debt. Should you make use of debt? Yes. Debt is good. Debt can be great in good times. Debt is dangerous in bad times. Make use of debt when you are more certain that what you're investing in is going to give you a positive return. David Zidel is an author of 2 books, Basic Business Calculations and Life on the Run, 18 Steps to Success. He is the creator of an executive strategy and finance game and recently won a Mentor of the Year award. David has over 25 years of experience as a facilitator at many leading business schools. I'm David Zidel, and this was your Money Tree Moment.